Have you ever really, truly stopped to think about what money is? I mean, it's not just the paper in your wallet or the numbers on a screen, it's a technology. And honestly, it's one of the most important inventions in all of human history. So if we want to understand our world today, we have to understand the story of money. Let's dive right in.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with the absolute basics. What is money and why do we even need it? Then we'll look at some of humanity's first experiments with currency. From there, we'll see why gold became the king of money, and then we'll cover the big break, how we moved to the government-controlled system we have today. And finally, we'll wrap it all up by asking, what really makes for sound money?
You know, before money existed, there was just stuff. And if you wanted someone else's stuff, you had to trade your stuff for it. This system, we call it barter, sounds simple enough, right? But it actually has a huge economy-killing problem baked right into it. So seriously, why do we need money at all? Why couldn't we just stick with trading things directly? Well, let's imagine for a second. Let's say you're a fisherman and you need a new pair of shoes. Now, in a barter world, you can't just walk up to the shoemaker. No, you have to find a shoemaker who not only has shoes that fit you, but who also just so happens to be craving some fish right now. See the problem? This little problem has a big name: the lack of a coincidence of wants. It's just wildly inefficient. Think about all the time and energy you'd waste just trying to find that one perfect person to trade with. An economy just can't grow that way. To get past this, humanity needed an intermediary, something that everyone would accept in a trade, whether they wanted to use it themselves or not. So, for any good to successfully level up and become money, it pretty much has to do three essential jobs. First, it has to be a medium of exchange. That's the intermediary thing that solves the whole barter problem. Second, it needs to be a good store of value, which just means it holds on to its purchasing power over time. And third, it eventually becomes a unit of account, a kind of universal yardstick we can use to measure the value of everything else. Okay, so with that framework in our back pocket, let's look at how early societies actually solved this puzzle. I mean, we're talking seashells, cattle, glass beads. People came up with some pretty ingenious ways to create money long before governments ever got involved. And one of the most incredible examples comes from the Pacific island of Yap. For centuries, their money was something called rye stones. These were massive, circular limestone discs. And when I say massive, I mean some of them weighed as much as a car. The way these rye stones worked is just fascinating. They were valuable because you couldn't find limestone on Yap. It had to be quarried and shipped from hundreds of miles away, which was a super difficult and dangerous journey. That made them scarce. But here's the craziest part: the stones almost never moved. When a transaction happened, everyone on the island would just publicly acknowledge that, okay, the ownership of that stone has changed. The ledger in everyone's head was what mattered, not where the stone actually was. And the story of the Yap stones really drives home the most critical characteristic of any good money: its ability to hold value over time. Right? Your fish are going to spoil, but the stones don't. This ability to be a reliable store of value, to be worth pretty much the same tomorrow as it is today, that's a concept known as monetary hardness. And believe me, it is the key to this whole story. So how do we actually measure this hardness? Well, the best way is something called the stock-to-flow ratio. Think of it like this: the stock is the total existing pile of something, all the supply that's already out there. The flow is the new amount that gets produced each year. So a high stock-to-flow ratio means it's really, really hard to increase the total supply. That's what makes for hard money that holds its value. Rye stones were hard money precisely because the flow of new stones was just a tiny trickle compared to the existing stock. But this whole system came crashing down thanks to an Irish-American captain named David O'Keefe. See, he showed up with modern ships and tools and started quarrying huge amounts of new stones with very little effort. By dramatically increasing the flow, he completely collapsed the stock-to-flow ratio. The stones suddenly became easy to make, they lost their scarcity, and poof, their monetary value was destroyed. It's like a perfect historical lesson in the easy money trap. Now, this easy money trap has happened over and over again throughout history, with seashells, with beads, even with certain metals. But one commodity proved to be uniquely resistant to it, and that, of course, brings us to the story of gold. For millennia, in this giant global free market competition, humans tried pretty much everything you can imagine as money.
But which one naturally came out on top as the most resistant to that easy money trap? Which one had the highest stock-to-flow ratio?
Well, the answer, as this chart makes crystal clear, is gold. By a mile. But why? Well, it's because gold is chemically inert and basically indestructible. That means almost every single ounce of gold ever mined is still around today, creating a massive existing stock. And the new gold we mine each year, the flow, is just a tiny fraction of that giant stock. No other commodity even comes close. Even if the price of gold were to double tomorrow, miners just can't suddenly flood the market. And that's why it has held its value for literally thousands of years.
This all came to a head in an era that was literally called the Beautiful Era, La Belle Époque. For a few incredible decades, pretty much the whole world was on a single monetary standard, gold. Currencies like the dollar, the pound, the franc, they were just different names for a specific weight of gold. And this created a period of unbelievable global trade, innovation, and prosperity.
And, this wasn't just about economics. As the famous economist Ludwig von Mises pointed out, a sound global money was seen as the very foundation for a more free and peaceful world. It encouraged cooperation instead of conflict. But this beautiful era came to a sudden and catastrophic end.
So what on earth happened? How did we go from a world united by a sound, market-chosen money, to the system we have today where every country has its own government-run currency? Well, the turning point was a single world-shattering event. 1914, the beginning of the First World War. This year marks the death of the classical gold standard. And if you want to understand modern money, you have to understand what happened right here. Wars are just incredibly, unbelievably expensive. Under a gold standard, a government can only spend the gold it has in its vaults. So to get around that physical limit, the warring nations of Europe simply cut the cord. They told their people they couldn't redeem their paper money for gold anymore. And then they fired up the printing presses and created vast new quantities of money to pay for the war.
And the result was immediate, and it was dramatic. Just look at this chart. It shows the value of those warring nations' currencies compared to the Swiss franc, which stayed neutral and stayed on the gold standard. The trend is obvious. As governments printed money to pay for bullets and bombs, their currencies absolutely cratered in value. They were funding the war by devaluing the life savings of their own citizens.
This move created a totally different kind of money. Let's compare. Under a gold standard, money is a physical thing, and its supply is limited by nature. Under a fiat money system, fiat literally means by decree, money is a paper monopoly controlled by a central bank. Its supply can be increased whenever they want.
Now, the final break didn't happen overnight. After World War I, there were some attempts to patch together a new kind of gold standard. Then, in 1944, the Bretton Woods Agreement made the US dollar the world's reserve currency because it was still backed by gold, at least for other governments. But the final tie was cut in 1971, when the US slammed the gold window shut, ending convertibility completely. And that plunged the entire world into a pure fiat money experiment for the very first time in history.
Okay, so after this whole journey, from giant stones to government control, what's the big takeaway? What have we learned? What is the core principle that really defines good or sound money?
Well, looking back at our history, sound money seems to have 4 key traits. 1, it's chosen freely by people on the market, not forced on them by a government. 2, it's hard to make more of. It has a high stock-to-flow ratio. 3, because of that, it reliably holds its value across time. And finally, it's truly yours. It's fully controlled by its owner, not some third party that can devalue it, freeze it, or take it away. Money has always been a technology. From stones that were tracked on a mental ledger, to scarce metals, to government paper, each new form of money was an upgrade that solved the problems of the one before it. And that brings us to the critical question for our time. In an age of digital information and global networks, what does the next evolution of sound money look like?